members and guests, respected dignitaries, distinguished members, and guests. Good evening. I thank each and every one of you for being here. I'm very delighted and pleased to welcome you all to this webinar, Agile Project Management. The Agile Project Management principles and frameworks encourage learning and adopting as an integral part of delivering value to the customers. If you want to innovate, you have to iterate. I take this opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Noor Mohammed Khalid Sahab, to share his project management experience. He did his master's from International Islamic University, Malaysia, and is in the process of commencing his PhD program. He is a certified Scrum Master and have achieved many levels in IT-related fields for nearly 33 years. He was passionately involved in information technology, and his last assignment in Riyadh was to manage a multi-million-dollar project in leading public sector enterprises. Over to Noor Mohammed Khalid Sahab. The screen is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Am I audible, Ansari Sahab? Rehan Ansari Sahab?
Yes, yes,
okay.
Sir.
Right. I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, seeking His blessings and His help. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. I have always been an advocate of doing something innovative, as we will call it disruptive. So if I am to speak to you purely about Agile and what exactly is Scrum and what are the Scrum artifacts, Scrum values, Scrum events, then those are all things that are readily available on the web. I don't think I will be able to add great value. At the same time, a webinar or a presentation of this kind, which does not speak about those things, is also incomplete. But allow me to start with certain points to keep in mind forever. Whatever the state of the project you are in, whatever the state of career you are in, these are eternal messages. The first thing that one has to keep in mind is the following. What do we learn from our faith in terms of project management? What are the examples that we find in the Quran itself? And what does the Hadith have to teach us about this? I'm not giving you a Friday sermon, but at the same time, there is no need to be apologetic about wearing your faith in all your activities, because we believe that Islamic thought, that is going to be the subject of my PhD, has influenced science, technology, sociology, and every branch of human knowledge. So allow me to begin by quoting an incident in the Quran, which very often we have heard about. The Quran calls it Ahsan al-Qasas, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. I'm not going to go into the beginning of the story or the end of the story, but an incident in the middle of the story is important. Acha, am I too fast, Rehan bhai? Okay. You can just give a thumbs up for okay. All right. So if I'm too fast, you can always slow me down. Because the problem in the Indian audience, whenever I go to speak, is when I speak in Urdu, they say, aapki Urdu bahut high hai. When I speak in English, they say, Sadra asan English bolo. So I don't know how to manage that. I'm not very good at that. But चलिए, अगर जरा भी आपको महसूस हो कि मेरी जुबान आपके समझ में नहीं आ रही है, तो मुझे आप रोक कर माने पूछ सकते हैं जब कभी चाहे. So I give that liberty to Mr. Rehan. Anyway, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam teaches us many different lessons. But one particular event in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam is extremely pertinent insofar as our discussion today is concerned. So I'm trying to time all these stories. Varna ye, I will end up telling you stories and nothing about Agile. So, okay. Where am I now? Right. When Yusuf alayhi salam was in the prison and the king saw a dream and that dream was recounted to him, So Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted the dream in a way that the king was satisfied that this interpretation is excellent. So he sends word for Yusuf alayhi salam and he asks him how best he can reward him or how best he can make him more closer to himself as an advisor. So Yusuf alayhi salam says in the words of the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Ij'alni ala khada'inil ard, inni hafidun alim. Make me in charge of the resources of the earth. Inni hafidun alim. You will find me trustworthy and knowledgeable. So these are the two qualities with which he qualifies himself. He says, one, you will find me to be trustworthy, and the other, you will find me to be knowledgeable. Now let's jump to the story of Musa alayhi salam, again from the Quran, when he helps those two maidens or damsels in pulling water out from a well which was surrounded by men and they couldn't get to the well. He helps them out, gets them the water, and these ladies go and tell their father that, look, Shuaib alayhi salam, that we encountered this young man who helped us, and why don't we employ him? And the words they used to qualify Musa alayhi salam is, Inna khayra man istaja'ata, man istaja'ar, man istaja'art, al-qawi al-amin. Let's remember these two words. The best person to be employed is one who is al-qawi al-amin. Earlier we read about al-hafiz and al-alim in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam. Here we are told about al-qawi al-amin. Khayru man ista'jarta al-qawi al-amin. So these are the qualities identified for anybody who needs to be appointed to any responsible position in life. Now, since we are dealing with projects, I'll apply this to projects. Any person in any form of project management, be it Agile or Waterfall or any other type of project or a hybrid version, he needs to have these qualities, not certificates. The first qualities he needs to have is he should be very trustworthy. That's why I've always discussed with people and debated that one quality in a project manager that makes him stand out from the others is not communication, not just knowledge, not just subject matter expertise, but integrity. He should be a person of integrity. He should be Amin. He should be Hafiz. He should be trustworthy. And also Alim, knowledgeable. And in the words of the ladies who spoke to Shuaib alayhi salam, their father, should also be strong. Not only strong-willed, but also physically strong. Because projects involve a lot of physical effort. So that's laying the foundation. So don't ever believe that if you get a Scrum certification or a PMBOK, you will become a successful project manager. Maybe you will get a job, but it won't be sustained. You will not be able to grow. You might even lose the job more sooner than you thought. What are the other things that we can learn from, especially in the context of Agile? The most important thing in the context of Agile is that you must remember that even though the entire approach is iterative, you must always have a very big picture in front of you. This is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the first hadith in Bukhari, in which he said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. All things, all actions are by intentions, and the person gets what he intends for. So it means, though you will have your rewards based on your intentions, it is also a fact to keep in mind that you will get whatever you intend for. So, like my ustad used to tell me, niyaton mein bakhili mat kariye. Don't be niggardly in imagining things. But the most relevant hadith which I found in the context of Agile, which we must not lose sight of, is this incident when the Prophet ﷺ goes for the Mi'raj and he sees a person collecting wood, firewood, tying it up and trying to lift it. And he's unable to do so because of the weight of the bundle. Then he keeps the bundle down, he adds more sticks to it, ties it up again and tries to lift it. Again, he keeps the bundle down, adds more twigs to that, and binds it up and tries to lift it. So the Prophet ﷺ is obviously intrigued. He asks Jibreel alayhi salam, what kind of a person is this? So he says that this is the example of a person who cannot take up the existing burden, but he's going on adding more burdens to his tasks. So I find this particular incident very relevant when it comes to Scrum or Agile as such. As we know, Agile basically is a framework and Scrum is one of the methodologies used. There is Kanban and there are other such things. I'm not an expert in everything else, except I've implemented Kanban in my work and I've implemented Agile to a great extent, not fully, because it's more easily said than done. Anyway, let's get on to the real subject now. So if there are any questions about what I said this far, you can either put it on the chat or make a note of it and ask me whenever the right time for it comes. How time flies, subhanAllah. Anyway, most often people say, okay, what's the difference between an agile and a traditional project management method? So the approach generally is to compare it with what we call the waterfall method. The waterfall method is what we are generally used to, at least before Agile and Scrum became popular. We would have the entire list of tasks to be done, the scope, and we would have what is called a complete WBS, a work breakdown structure. We would have what is called dependencies, start to finish, finish to start, start to start, finish to finish, dependencies between different tasks, assign resources, work out the cost for each one of them, and then start the project. But today, with the kind of dynamism in the market and the changes that are happening, and the reason to change in between midway because of competition or because of change in technology or because of change in statutory requirements, because of that, you cannot use the waterfall method for all projects. However, when it comes to public sector projects, where I was involved in, their Agile is not the best approach, but there are certain aspects of Agile which I have brought into a classical waterfall, what is called here the faith-driven development. I'll talk about that as we go by. So this is primarily the difference between an Agile approach and the waterfall. Agile believes in taking up a few tasks to be implemented, reviewing at the end of the period of a specific period, not more than 4 weeks, as to how things went, and then find out if there are new demands or new requirements that have crept in because of market demands or because of scope creep or whatever, and then adjust the next set of activities accordingly. I'll give you the actual names for these things, but basically what you should understand is, by this example you can see on the screen, that there's a huge risk involved in taking up what is called a waterfall approach, where one task cascades to another, into another, into another. That's what is meant by a waterfall here, the cascading effect. But in Agile, what happens is that you are doing delivery in incremental steps, little by little, little by little. You're taking a small bundle, lifting it up, then you add more sticks to it, then your capability increases, then you go up, and so on and so forth, till you are in a position that you can release a product. Let's go further and try to understand what exactly is this. This is what we should understand in 30 seconds. Basically, what the Scrum framework involves is the following. There is a product backlog. That product backlog, we use items in the product backlog to create a sprint backlog. Then we plan the sprint, and then we start implementing it. And no sprint should be greater than 4 weeks, ideally 2 weeks, but depending on the amount of work to be done. Now we'll understand each one of these things in their context. In the sense, we'll break up every one of them. So there is this concept of a team, sprint planning, and sprint review. And after the sprint review, we have a retrospective. So we'll discuss what exactly the sprint is, what exactly the daily Scrum is all about, and what are the different uh, what they call as different Scrum values, different artifacts, and Scrum events. But what is the end result? At the end of every sprint, we should have a potentially shippable product or an increment. Let's say, for example, the first sprint is to design the user interface of an application with all the navigation tools in it. So at the end of the sprint, it should be a workable, releasable module. Till then, it's not a sprint. So the whole idea is you are delivering things in increments, but those increments are not going to be vague increments or something that need another increment to make sense of. No, as far as possible, each sprint or each increment will result in a potentially shippable product. Well, this is the entire framework of Scrum rather. You have what is called the team forming, the proof of concept, you have release planning, you have the entire product backlog. From that product backlog, and I'll tell you what the product backlog is all about, you choose a subset of that and you create what is called a sprint backlog, and then you begin the sprint. When the sprint is completed, you have a review and a retrospect. And depending on the review and the retrospect, you refine the product backlog. What does all this mean? I'll explain to you, inshallah. So let's understand a few other basic fundamentals about the Scrum theory. Scrum is basically based on what they call the empirical process control theory. Now, everything is empirical. It should be something that you can prove, that comes from experience. So Scrum employs what is called an iterative incremental approach to optimally and to control risk. So let's get into the pillars of Scrum first. The basics, or rather empirical theory. One is transparency, inspection, and adaptation. What does it mean? Everything that you do must be very transparent, and it should be subject to an inspection. And at the end of the inspection, you should be able to adapt yourself based on the feedback you get. But all this is based on a certain set of values. There are essentially some values identified, and I'll explain this to you later. Though I believe that this much theory is not needed, but in an audience of 10, 15 people, there are even one or two people who are important, who want to learn about the Scrum values, so I can't overlook them for the sake of those who are not interested in the theory, but would like to go directly into the practical implementation of Scrum. So primarily the Scrum values are commitment, courage, openness, commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. So these are primarily embodied and lived by the Scrum team. The Scrum pillars of transparency, inspection, and adaptation come to life to build trust for everyone. Now, actually, what I've done is, these things, what we call the values, are not universally agreed upon, because as you will see here, I put together the different versions of these values, and it's available on my LinkedIn profile as well. According to the Scrum Alliance, what is the meaning of commitment? According to Scrum Alliance, according to them, commitment is because we have a great control over our own destiny. We are more committed to success. Another organization calls it committing yourself to the team and goal. These are some things that I would like you to keep in front of you and read at your leisure, rather than use up your time just to tell you lessons, which, like I always say, it's available online. You can as well go into that. But my only job is to point out those things that are available and request you to read them. So don't forget that the basic values are commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. And these are explained, like I said, according to one particular group, focus means this, another group, focus means this, the third group, focus means this. But basically, they all agree on what focus is. That depends on how you would like to view it. So let's come back. So this is something that's available for any one of you to view. It's available on my, I can even share it if you like, in whatever form you like in the WhatsApp group. So, so the next important thing to understand about Scrum, of course, there are lots of things to understand about Scrum here. One is the product backlog, then the sprint backlog, then the Scrum events like the sprint review, the Scrum, the sprint retrospect, all these SSS sounding words. So let's try to look at it from your career point of view now. Where do you think you would like to fit in with respect to agile project management? Because there are different roles that people play in a Scrum team. And I'm going to discuss this over here. Primarily, there are three major roles, what they call the product owner, the member of the team, of the development team, and the Scrum Master. I am focused mainly as a Scrum Master, but there are certifications for product owners as well. So these Scrum teams essentially are self-organizing and cross-functional. What does it mean, self-organizing and cross-functional? That means they are not being dictated to by other members of the corporation. They are organizing themselves. And their most important quality of a Scrum team is that they are cross-functional. Like, for example, it's not just the development team will not just consist of coders or developers. It will consist of the designer. It will consist of the analyst. It will consist of the tester. It will consist of what we call the person who the release manager. So it's going to be a cross-functional team. So you can never do a complete sprint unless you have a cross-functional team. So is that clear? If you have a doubt, you can always ask me. So these cross-functional teams should have the competencies needed to accomplish the work without depending on others who are not part of the team. It's not that, you know, in the waterfall approach, one is, say, for example, you do the complete system analysis, system design, then you give it to the developers, then those developers develop code, then eventually it goes to the testing team, then the testers test it, and then finally they give their feedback back here. It's a long process, and I've been involved in all these processes. It's extremely long, and by the time the developers receive feedback from the testing team, the market would have changed. And not only that, when it goes for what we call pre-production, or it is hosted into the pre-production server, then the operations team comes in and says, no, this is not how it should be. We cannot manage this. That's why we have DevOps now, where the operations is also involved in the development process. So I'm not speaking on DevOps now, but try to understand that the Scrum team must be self-organizing and cross-functional. All right. The team model is designed to optimize flexibility, creativity, and productivity. That's the basic purpose. So if you do not have a cross-functional team, you should not even attempt a sprint. Okay, now what is a sprint? You might be wondering. I'll come to that. And the very important thing about any discussion on Scrum is to define what is the meaning of done. I have, in my past experience, encountered numerous cases where the development head will come and tell me, done. We have done our job. But then when it goes for the first round of testing, immediately the testers or the stakeholders will come and tell you, no, we're not yet done. You have not done this. You have not done that. So you need to define what is the meaning of done. So that, unless it is what they call done, till then it is not considered complete. So it's a constant struggle in any development team or as a conventional project manager to deal with this question of done. The team says done, the customer says not done. Now, what is done according to the team is not done according to the customer. So you need to define what is meant by done. When can this particular sprint be considered done? So anyway, we'll discuss that as we go by. So every sprint should have a goal. Now, exactly What do we understand by sprint? A sprint is nothing but taking parts of the big list of what we call the product backlog list. We'll discuss product backlog list. It's called PBL. And seeing what items in this product backlog list can be completed within 2 to 4 weeks. And at the end of this period, you will have something that's potentially shippable. Not necessarily that you start shipping it, should be potentially shippable. But before you start a sprint, you need to define your goals. And as we all have been hearing this word called SMART, the goals must be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time boxed. There's a large amount of focus in sprint on what is called time boxing. If you don't time box, then you will never achieve a sprint in time. Anyway, I know I'm really running out of time. I don't know how fast time goes. So the sprint goal basically is to guide the development team and why it is building an increment. And it is done during the sprint planning. So I'm just going to summarize this now to save time. A sprint goal, for example, if you're doing some product in life sciences, to support one sprint will be support features necessary for population genetic studies. If it's a database application you're developing, make the application run on SQL Server, that's Microsoft SQL Server, or MS SQL, and in addition to Oracle. If it's financial services, a product that you're developing for financial services, it should support more technical indicators than your competitor in real time with streaming data, etc. This is just to summarize because I know I'm running out of time. I've decided not to speak for more than 45 minutes. I'm almost completing 30. So sprint planning is the backbone of any Scrum implementation. What exactly is sprint planning? Sprint planning is taking items from the product backlog list, time boxing it for on an average of 8 hours a day for a month or shorter. Is the job of the Scrum Master to ensure the event takes place and the attendees understand the purpose. That's the major role of the Scrum Master. We will discuss about it in further detail later. And what is the role of the Scrum Master? That's going to come up. In the sprint planning, you answer certain basic questions. One of the questions is, what can be done in this sprint? How will the chosen work get done? These are kind of questions that you will ask during your sprint planning. This is the summary of the sprint planning. Team selects item from the product backlog they can commit to completing. Sprint backlog is created. See, remember this point here. The team must commit to completing it. Nobody will dictate from outside that you need to complete these many items in this time. The team is self-organizing, cross-functional. So they sit together in a sprint planning and decide, okay, this is what we can do. This is what we cannot do. Here is an example. For example, as a vacation planner, I want to see photos of the hotels. If you're doing an application which involves this. So what are the tasks? Code the middle tier, code the user interface, write test fixtures, code the FOO class, update performance tests. Now, in any Scrum implementation, there is what is called a product backlog list. We will discuss that as we go by. We have a sprint, we have sprint planning, and we have what is called the daily Scrum. Part of any Scrum implementation involves the development team, a Scrum Master, and a product owner. What do these people do? They meet every day. They also call it a stand-up meeting. In every 24-hour period, they at least dedicate, or at the maximum, they dedicate 15 minutes to discuss certain things. What did I do yesterday? What will I do today? What are the impediments that prevented me yesterday from doing what I wanted to do? And what are the impediments that I foresee that will come in the way of me meeting the goal of the sprint? The development team uses the daily Scrum to inspect the progress. So this aspect about the daily Scrum is very, very crucial. That's why most development teams, according to the Microsoft solution frameworks, are ideally those which are physically close to each other. Teams that are virtual or geographically spread are not as effective as teams that are working physically close to each other. Of course, with COVID, things are a little different. So anyhow, so the idea is that the daily scrum must take place religiously. I have noticed that whenever people do not meet every day, the things that you want to do will never get done the way you want it to be done. So the advantage in daily scrums is mentioned here. I'll share the presentation. You may go through them. This is just a quick summary of that. It should be held daily. It should be 15 minutes. It should be stand up. Is there anybody who wants to ask some question? Okay.
No, sir, please go ahead.
Okay, now go ahead. Okay, so this is a quick summary. What did you do yesterday? What will you do today? Is anything that's coming in your way? This is primarily an important thing to do. So at the end of the sprint, it's very, very important to have a sprint review. Okay, 2 week or 4 week. This is what we had set up as the goal. This is what was the sprint backlog. This is what we achieved or did not achieve. So here, this will include the Scrum team, key stakeholders invited by the product owner. The product owner's job basically is to interface with the stakeholders, those who want the product developed, or those who want a particular event happening, or those who want a particular project to be implemented. So during the sprint review, the outsiders can come in, but the sprint review is primarily to be done where the Scrum Master and the development team gets together and the product owner explains to the stakeholders what product backlog items have been done and what have not been done. The development team discusses what went well, not in that particular day or the day before, but in the entire sprint period. Am I too fast? Am I going too rapidly? Rehan Bhai, can you advise?
No,
Should
sir,
I go slower?
Going very well, sir.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Anyway, so the development team demonstrates the work that is done. Now here again, done is within quotes. The reason is that what is done according to the development team may not be done as per the stakeholder. So the stakeholders will look at it and the product owner will interface with the stakeholders and then they will decide whether what they consider to be done is actually done or not done. So I'm going to give you a quick summary of the sprint review. Primarily, you need about 2 hours prepare time. There will be no slides as per this suggestion. The whole team participates. You can invite the whole world, but they will just be mute participators. It is the team that will do all the review and present their findings, what they consider to be done to the stakeholders and the product owner. After this is done, the team, excluding the stakeholders, will sit together and decide what they did right, what they did not do right. It's one recommendation is it should not be more than a 3-hour meeting. So the basic idea in the retrospective is how the sprint went, what are the major items that didn't go well, and then you create a plan for implementing improvements in the way the Scrum team does its work. That's the whole idea. So these are called events. One of the first event is the sprint planning event. The next is the sprint review. And the third is the sprint retrospective. Is that clear? You know, doing virtual presentations where you are not interacting, you are not writing on the board is not very effective. But anyway, in the absence of any other means, this is the best available approach. So this is a summary of what I was trying to tell you. And I know I have only how many minutes left, Rehan Bhai? 10 minutes or 5 minutes? We started 5 minutes late.
6 minutes, sir.
Okay, fine. So this is what a sprint retrospective is all about. Who will attend? The Scrum Master, the product owner, and the team. I do not recommend the customers attending it because this is an internal introspection. भाई तुम ऐसा क्यों किए, तुम वैसा क्यों किए, sprint review में stakeholders के सामने ये नहीं बोलना था, वगैरह. So preferably it's done within the team. Now, what exactly is this thing called the product backlog we've been talking about? We call it the PBL. The product backlog is something to remember about the product backlog is it's a living document. आज आप decide किए भाई ये project का जो product होगा इसके अंदर ये features होंगे. These are the features that will constitute this particular product. I'm starting a teacher training program, and these are the basic goals we will achieve in the teacher training program. And this is the end result. But later on, as you go, as one sprint is achieved and the new sprint starts, a new requirement comes in and saying, see, the teacher training program should also include how to use Zoom, how to use technology. That was not anticipated when you first created the product backlog list. So the product backlog list is what we call the macro product. Yeah, in the waterfall terminology, it is the entire scope of the project. But in the waterfall, the scope is normally frozen and you are advised to avoid what is called scope creep. But that is not true about sprint. In sprint, the product backlog is a living document, and at the end of every sprint, you go down and you remove items from the product backlog that have been completed. And based on the feedback, you might add new features. That's what they call as the product backlog refinement. I don't have the time to create a brief PBL for a community project. I will, during the question answer session, go into that. So what is the product backlog refinement? The product backlog refinement is nothing but the act of adding detailed estimates and order to items in the product backlog. What do you mean by order? Certain things become priority during a certain period. Then you decide, no, I think, teaching teachers how to use Zoom is more of an important priority. Or you're developing a fintech product. Suddenly you realize that the new RBI regulations say that you must disclose the identity of every investor and the PAN card. So you now bring this into your priority. So a product backlog is not just a list of things to be done, but also the order of priority in which should be done. And this can get refined as and how at the end of every sprint. Now, from the product backlog, you get the sprint backlog. For every sprint, you have a set of items culled out from the product backlog, which you are going to keep in mind when you start implementing. So you will not do a sprint more than what a sprint will allow you to do. You will only carry that much burden as you are capable of doing. You will not take up more than what requires more than 4 weeks. So this is a very important thing about preparing a sprint backlog, because during the, well, this is just an example of a sprint backlog, code the user interface, etc., etc., etc. Rehan Bhai will tell me now to shut up. So before that, let me quickly get into this. I already spoke about the definition of done. I've just given a few samples of what is exactly. Okay, now that comes to the most important thing, which I want you people to understand is what are the different roles of what are the different roles that you can qualify for? The first thing is a Scrum Master. What are his responsibilities? He teaches and coaches people on how to perform various roles. He acts as a change agent, serves the product owner and the team. The product owner's job is to interface with the stakeholders. Now I'm going at fast speed, rapid speed. So I've got maybe 2-3 minutes left. He removes impediments, because at the daily Scrum, they tell the Scrum Master, look, we faced these impediments. We had a power failure. Our keyboards need to be changed. We need a better quality mouse, blah, 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 blah. And then what he does, he also protects the team. When their team is subject to some kind of criticism, he makes sure that the team is not degraded. The respect of the team is not lost. So the product owner, primarily, as I had explained to you before, he creates and maintains the product backlog. He interfaces with the stakeholders. He participates in the Scrum events like the sprint review and the sprint retrospect. The team, the responsibility of the team, as I've discussed earlier, is the self-organizing, delivers a product increment in every sprint, manages the sprint backlog, and does the sprint tracking. They participate in sprint meetings, etc., etc., etc. That's quite obvious. Now, I had to meet a timeline because this is the spirit of Scrum or Agile. You have to time box your tasks. You cannot endlessly go on. Now, of course, you will have, inshallah, some time to ask me further questions in this respect. So I will be happy to. See, I have maintained a reputation for never exceeding my time by even 1 minute in any oral lecture I give or in any presentation I do. That's very important in sprint. Time box your event. Please, now you can unmute people and ask them to ask questions. If you want some more explanation, then that will be session 2. I will not exceed my time. Thank you very much. I'm waiting for questions.
So if anyone has any doubt, then please feel free to ask.
Somebody asked a question in the chat. Can we make a career as Scrum Master? No, you can definitely make a career in Scrum Master. There are very few Scrum Masters available. But the only thing, like I said earlier, it's not just a certification that matters. It's your integrity. It's alimun, hafidun, and qawiyun. Don't forget these 3 take-homes. And this is in the Quran. This is things for eternity. Scrum is something that came about the day before yesterday, so to speak. But these indicators in the Quran, unfortunately, we jump into a career without this necessary background. And then that's when we fail. We don't fail because we don't have the right certifications. We fail because we did not deliver. We don't deliver because we don't have the qualities. And believe me, Yusuf alayhi salam was appointed in a non-Muslim government. The Aziz Masr, or the ruler of Egypt at that time, was not a Muslim, at least from all accounts that we know of. But yet he appointed him on the basis of his qualities. And you know what he did? Of course, it's a great story. And the Quran qualifies the story of Ahsanul Qasas, the best of stories. And I don't know how many of us have really read the story. And a very interesting thing, if you allow me to add, about sprint retrospect or sprint review is, again from Surah Kahf, Musa alayhi salam sets out with a companion to meet Khidr, with whom he is going to gain some knowledge. The milestone was that he will meet Khidr. I'm sorry. I'm 66 years and I'm just recovered from COVID. It was a very severe form of COVID. So you should pardon me for my coughing in between. So, kich dooj kariye, Vicks ki goli lijiye. That doesn't work. Anyhow, so when Musa alayhi salam was with his companion, he set out, the hint was that the fish that they were carrying in a basket would escape into they were walking on the shores of the sea, would go into the sea, and at that spot, they would meet Khidr alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam and his companions are walking, and Musa alayhi salam tells his companion, look, I'm feeling very hungry. Get me some food to eat. So the companion says, oh my God, I forgot to tell you that the fish that we were carrying for food, it miraculously escaped from the basket and got into the sea. Okay. And I forgot to tell you, وَمَا أَنْسَانِيهُ إِلَّا الشَّيْطَانُ أَنْ أَذْكُرَ. So Musa alayhi salam tells him, ذَلِكَ مَا كُنَّا نَبْغِي. This is what we wanted. Why did you forget to tell me? So he said, no, I forgot because the shaitan made me forget. So what did Musa alayhi salam do? But a Muslim like me, particularly the subcontinental Muslim, will do, Chodo bhai, Allah ki marzi, kya ki isme khair renga, chalo aage badhenge. But Musa alayhi salam didn't say that. He said, ذلك ما كنا نبغي فارتد على آثارهم قصص فوجد عبدا من عبادنا. So what did Musa alayhi salam do? He said, okay, let's go back. And they retraced their footsteps. It's a great lesson. If you've done something wrong in one sprint, you don't insist that, okay, no, done. Why you are saying not done? No, you do a sprint review and a sprint retrospective, and you go back and refine your sprint backlog for the next sprint, your product backlog, and then from there you win. So anyway, this is extra time. Since nobody's asking me a question.
Sir,
Anything else, brothers? Okay, there's a question. Could you give me some examples of where waterfall method is more applicable than agile method? I'll give you an example. We were implementing modernization of certain legacy applications in a particular organization in Saudi Arabia. I don't know whether it's right to mention the name, but it's okay. Let's avoid the name. There, it was a driving license application in the IBM mainframe where we had to modernize it. In the sense, we had to give it a UI, user interface. You know what happens? You get the 3270 dot matrix screen. It's not appealing, so we had to make it appealing. Now, in these cases, you can't apply Agile. Here is a legacy application. It can't change. You can't bring about changes overnight. Even if the government decides to make some changes to who can apply for a driving license. For example, ladies were not allowed to apply for a driving license earlier. Then they were later allowed. But that was a major change. It was not something that happened at the course of development. That happened in an already existing application, which was being modernized. Here, you could not do that except the waterfall method. Similarly, there could be other examples, like, for example, at the moment, immediately, you can't think of anything. But this was one valid example, adding a feature to allow ladies to apply for driving licenses. So, but that was a completely new development. It was not modifying an ongoing development. So that is one example. And you can, extrapolate this example anyway, especially government applications, which are not recommended to be changed. How you apply for a passport, the process of granting a passport. So this happens over a period of, let's say, after the first budget and then between the period of one budget and the other. So unless there is a great change, like a dictator comes in and says, no, I'm not going to give people who wear hijab any more passports. So something like this happens, then you will have to go midway and make the change. So, but waterfall, I hope it's clear to you. So agile is more suitable for online manufacturing, online online shopping, and edutech and fintech kind of applications, and also non-IT related applications. Like, for example, I gave you the example of the teacher training project. Okay, you expected these many activities to be done within this period. All of a sudden, there's a new requirement that teachers need to be trained in these skills as well. For example, maybe the government makes it a regulation that in Karnataka, for example, every teacher, irrespective of private school or public school, must have Kannada literacy and achieve a certain standard. So what do? You change your priority and say, no. First, Kannada matad gottirbeku. ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಾವು ಬೇರೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡೋಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತೆ. I don't know whether you understand Kannada. தமிழ்ல சொல்றேன். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வந்துட்டு தமிழ் பேசணும், அப்புறம் வந்துட்டு வேற ஐட்டம்ஸ் சொல்லலாம். അവൻ മലയാളം ആവശ്യം നിങ്ങൾ ഫസ്റ്റ് മലയാളം പഠിച്ചപ്പോൾ തന്നെ നമ്മൾക്ക് വേറെ ജോലി ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. తెలుగు తెలుసులేదు. So I don't know Telugu. So let's go ahead. Any other question? That was more on the lighter side. I'm expecting some more questions, Why are people not asking me a question? Because do I look very fearsome? No, because I'm a Bangalorean, so I generally use this Deccani accent. Please understand, this was just an introduction. There is so much. I have a lot of Scrum related presentations, etc. in my in my hard disk. I'll be glad to share it. But, we need people. Good to hear that you're a Bangalorean. And I have 3 sons-in-law, one from Bangladesh, the second from Kashmir, and the third from UP. And my wife won't allow me another wife. So maybe I could have chosen somebody else. But there's no point in saying good lecture, excellent. At this age, I'm not looking for credit. I'm not looking for, what we will call patting each other's back. We really need hard questions, something difficult. Make this old man sweat.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, sir. This is
Walaikum
Shabir
salam.
here. Alhamdulillah, this is a very good session that you have taken. Just now I got this link from Shams Bhai in one of our WhatsApp group. So this is Shabir. I'm working in Wipro in Kolkata, and I have around 15 years of experience, mostly in SAP. I'm worked, and just like Agile projects, I have recently started working since around 2 years approximately. So my client itself is SAP. And right now I had an interest, I liked this Scrum Master role. And I had earlier worked as a release manager also. So recently I took up one Scrum Master role, and I'm working as a Scrum Master for SAP itself in one of their cloud deliveries. So this is my first, I just started from this week was the first week as this, and I'm not an expert in it. And I'm not a seasoned actually Scrum Master. So maybe I wanted some help from you, how can I actually become a good Scrum Master, and maybe not like a day in, day out doing the routine activities, but actually I can make some difference as a Scrum Master in the team.
How can you become a better Scrum Master? It all depends on the context. I have personally believed that if you have the right values, and which our religion teaches us, and if you have what is called courage, respect for your team, which are part of the Scrum values, and each of these values is there embedded in our DNA as a Muslim. See, now this is what our whole thought is all about. That if you have the right values, honesty, integrity, but at the same time, most Muslims are confused. They say, "Nahi bhai, iman raya to bas hai." I'm sorry about my accent. I can speak good Urdu also. बहुत से मुसलमान इस गलतफहमी में हैं. Jaवेद. People must mute their mics. So in any case, so you see, what we need to understand is that Iman is one thing. Yusuf alayhi salam did not qualify on the basis of his Iman. He qualified on the basis of his being Hafid, trustworthy, somebody.
Sheikh, I think you are muted. Noor Saab, I think you are muted.
Okay, I don't know. Somebody, maybe I muted myself. Kabhi mute रहना ही अच्छा है. The Prophet ﷺ says either you say something good or you become mute. So what I was saying is that if you look at these examples I gave you, you can learn Scrum like the back of your hand, but you can still not succeed. People respect values, and Scrum is based on a lot of values. And our values are, which the Quran indicates, to be honest, people with integrity, people with knowledge. Alimun, Hafidun. He did not say Hafiz first. He said Hafidun, Alimun. He's Alimun, Hafidun. Similarly, in the case of Musa alayhi salam, Khayra man ista'jart al-qawi al-amin. He should be strong. Strong in that sense, in those days, which involved pulling water from wells, the strength there meant different things. In our case, strength means strength of character, tenacity. Tenacity samajhte honge na sab log. These are kind of strengths we have, not getting into the typical office gossip, helping a colleague in distress, whether in the personal capacity, etc. That is enough for success. When I always used to tell people, why was Manmohan Singh India's prime minister for maybe 2 terms? despite being a member of a minority, despite varying his religion. Imagine if Manmohan Singh were to go to class and as a youngster, and they told him, no, you can't wear your pagdi to class. You wouldn't have Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister. It was purely on the strength of his character, his integrity, and his knowledge. Manmohan Singh is known for his integrity, but he's also known for his knowledge. Chaliye.
Okay,
Anybody
Jazakallah.
else? Jazakallah khair. Yeah, we run out of time. It's 1 full hour, unless there is a good question.
Sheikh, there is one more question. I think that will be the last question for today's session.
Please.
In the chat box, if you can refer the chat box.
Can I see that? Without freezing product backlog, how the project can be delivered within time frame. Otherwise, the requirement will keep coming. You see, this is a good question. What you should understand here is that if you're following the waterfall approach, then this is right. But when you're using the agile approach, if you freeze the product backlog, then it's no more agile. There is no more Scrum. Let's say, for example, you started developing a shopping cart or a complete online buying application similar to Amazon or eBay, and you have a very special feature nobody else has. All of a sudden, you need to make a change. How will you do it if your product backlog is frozen? No, it should be very flexible. That doesn't mean to say that flexible means every 1 month you need to make some change. So this has to be properly controlled by the product manager. He will tell the stakeholder, look, we cannot keep incorporating every single change you want. But at the same time, since the market demands it, or there is a statutory requirement. Now there's a new requirement which says that along with sales tax, there will be a surcharge for whatever reason. So that has to be added. Now, can you not, will you not add it into the billing? You will have to. So this is what is meant by keeping it open. Wow, how can we make a social entrepreneurship startup successful? That is not the subject that I'm dealing with. So that should be a totally different session altogether. I would love to share my thoughts on that. But a social entrepreneurship startup is more than just, is more than what I have covered now. It's a huge subject. I have some things to share with you because I have been part of, I have been more of an entrepreneur than a project manager. I used to run a computer training institute in Bangalore in 1985, even before the IBM PC came in. So it ran for 14 years. Then I started one of Bangalore's first computer store, so on and so forth. All this was modeled on an interest-free basis. We succeeded in some things, we failed in some things. Anyway, thank you very much for your presence. I would not be able to do justice to the question on how can we make a social entrepreneurship startup successful. It's too long an answer, but I'd love to discuss this probably offline. There is a doctor with the seminar name, Dr. What is his name? Forgetting it. He's part of another group. He's a very good example of somebody who's made a success of, he has a online medical application which can be used by hospitals. From the time you check out to your billing in the hospital, I've been part of that study. It's called Kameda Technologies, Kameda. Atat Khan, Dr. Atat Khan. The name Dr. Ataya Rabbi reminded me of Atat Khan. You can Google him. You can see Kameda Technologies. But it takes a lot of time to explain social entrepreneurship. But these qualities that are mentioned in the Quran are, the bedrock for any success in any enterprise. You need to be strong, you need to be reliable, you need to have integrity, and you should be knowledgeable. You start something and you don't have the knowledge for it, it won't work. Am lil insani ma tamanna. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, do you think a man will get only what he desires? No. ليس بأمانيكم ولا أماني أهل الكتاب من يعمل سوء يجزى به. Neither will you get what you desire or the Ahl Kitab get what they desire. من يعمل سوء يجزى به. Those who do evil, they will be requited. This is a rule. لا تبديل لسنة الله. Allah's sunnah will not change. That is the rule. Jazakallah khair, Wasim Bhai and Rehan Bhai and all the other participants. I was not in the best of health, but Allah helps. Pardon me if I have made mistakes. Whatever good is from Allah and whatever mistakes is from my side. Jazakallah. We can sign off whenever Wasim Bhai says so.
So,
There is one more question, if time permits.
I have
sir,
the
we are
time.
exceeding the time limit.
Yes, yes. No, is there any career in Scrum? Time limit is for the speaker, not for the people who are asking questions. Is there any career in Scrum? You know, I don't know any programming language. That's the best part. So what better example can I give you? I chose not to learn any programming language. The only programming language I learned was a language called, kya bolte hai usko? I even forgot the name of the language. I wrote a workbook on that. Very early. No, yeah, I'm forgetting that. Subhanallah. Anyway, you don't need to be a programmer, but you should have the right concepts. What is a program? You know, what exactly constitutes a program? How do programs work? What are the latest trends in programming languages? Which programming language is more suitable for what kind of application? I know from Prolog to Python, which each one of these things does. So I don't know how to code in Python. I don't know how to code in Prolog, but I know what they do. I know where they are used. I know what is ideally suitable. And I keep a trend on what are the changes that are happening. My language that I only learned was Logo, L-O-G-O. I wrote a workbook on Logo for school children. That was a language to teach people the concepts of programming, what they now call coding. And remember one thing, this is a big money-making racket. People are of two types. One who thinks from the right side of the mind, one who thinks from the left side of the mind. The people who think from the left side of the mind are good in mathematics, in what we call programming, coding, etc. They should take up coding. They should take up programming. People who are not good in coding or in mathematics or in these kind of sciences, they think on their toes. They are good in management. They are good in administration. They are good as leaders. So they should become Scrum Masters. They are not going to become members of the development team. They could become product managers, product owners. Does that answer your question? I hope. The people in Kolkata, Ami Bangla Bhasha Jani na. I said, I can't speak Bengali very well. Okay, Rehan bhai, you can call it off.
Brother Rehan, you can conclude.
Yeah. I thank all the participants for joining and making this webinar a success. I thank our speaker Noor Mohammed Khalid Sahab for accepting our invitation and providing valuable insights on Agile project management. Thank you one and all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum. Walaikum salam.
Jazakallah khair. Thanks a lot, Noor Sahab.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate if you could send me a critical feedback, like by